Hey y'all, and welcome to Politibrawl. My name is Brian, and Byron Donalds drops an absolute truth bomb about DEI that's so profound it left Chris Cuomo completely speechless. Let's dive in.
The main concern is if DEI isn't forced as a focus, you will not have representation and inclusion of minorities, regardless of foundation of merit. And that's why it needs to be a point of emphasis. What is your response to that argument, and how do you assure that everybody gets a fair chance?
Well, first of all, let me just say that DEI, and it's a construct of DEI, hasn't even been around long enough to even make that kind of a claim. We've had diversity of viewpoints, diversity ideas, not just in the federal government, but in the private sector for decades. The equity piece that was really introduced during the Biden-Harris administration at the federal level is the one that has a cause of concern because it ignores merit, it ignores skill sets, it ignores the ability to actually do the job and puts your demographic criteria at the front of the line before your actual qualifications. Look, I think at the end of the day, everybody wants to make sure that people who are getting jobs are qualified to do them. That is most important. But you can't put just diversity for diversity's sake ahead of qualifications. It's not 1972, it's 2025. We're in a different phase in the United States of America. And so I would argue that yes, meritocracy does matter, whether you're black, white, Hispanic, Asian, whatever the case might be. You have to have the skill set, you have to have the merit in order to acquire these jobs. Your diversity or your intersectionality cannot be the driving force because that does discriminate against other people who might be more qualified for that job.
And what about people of color who are qualified but don't get the opportunities that people who are in the majority get because of the inclination of employers and legacy and other acceptance mechanisms?
Well, let's just dissect that for a second. There's always going to be a legacy bias because the truth of the matter is that people who have legacy or have different connections, they're going to provide those connections to their children. That's just a fact of life. That's not a white thing. That's a parent thing. Every parent does that regardless of their skin color. You could look in the NBA right now where you have a lot of prospects moving up who are now the children of former NBA players. Why is that? Because their parents, their fathers actually went through the NBA process, whether they were superstars like LeBron James or not superstars, but they were able to use their connections to help their children achieve a better path forward in professional sports. That happens in every industry in our country. So put legacy aside. The key piece is if you have the talent and the ability to actually walk in the door and earn a position, yes, you sometimes have to work your way up from the bottom. I started my career in 2003 out of college. Black kid in Southwest Florida, had no connections. I started at the bottom. I worked my way up. This is how it is supposed to work. But if you just supercharge somebody past the initial starting blocks, do they have the requisite skill to get there? And do they have the requisite experience to stay there? That's where some of the DEI stuff that has come out. And again, this is very recent. Like I said, diversity has been a staple of corporate America for decades. That's something that's been there. But the equity component, trying to move somebody ahead of the line simply because of their intersectionality, actually does not work. It is discriminatory.
Y'all, there you have it. The best possible argument against DEI as an institutional ideal is laid out before you by a black man from the state of Florida, okay? Byron Donalds got where he was because of his own merit and his abilities. Now, the question that he did bring up that I think is very interesting, I've never really considered this before, because I've never been a huge fan of nepotism. That's not always fair. It's not always good for a business, but sometimes it works. We would not have Samwise Gamgee if the parents of Sean Astin had not been working in Hollywood. Okay, he probably wouldn't have gotten the job. But it turns out he actually knew what he was doing because the family had done it for so long. Carrie Fisher, you know, Princess Leia. She would have never been one of the most attractive women in all of fantasy. Star Wars Episode 6, if you know, you know. her parents were Hollywood royalty. She knew what she was doing because she had watched her parents do it time and time again. That is the good part of nepotism. And then we're talking about the NBA, even though, let's be honest, Bronny, oh, bless your heart. That's a nice sentiment, LeBron James, but maybe we should worry about that school that keeps underperforming back in Cleveland. But when it comes to that ideal, usually when kids watch their parents do their jobs and then are brought in, they're usually not bad at it themselves. There are times where it doesn't work and the child of a famous millionaire runs the company into the ground because he doesn't know what he's really doing because the parents spoiled the child. And then that runs into a very interesting theme when it comes to diversity and inclusion. Let's say there was this black lady math genius who worked for NASA, and because of her ability with mathematics, she was able to write code and do other calculations for the entirety of the NASA program. There's a movie about this starring Kevin Costner, and Kevin Costner's heading up the space program, and he's out there wondering, why is our top genius having to walk a whole mile around the complex just to use the bathroom? So he broke down some barriers because he knew that the person that was so valuable to his team that he kept on promoting her forward. The whole ideal of breaking down certain barriers, breaking down the ideas of segregation, congratulations. That's something that got defeated back in the 60s. That isn't there anymore. There might be echoes and radiation fallout from the past, but it's not standing law anymore. It's been over 60 years since Jim Crow was fully and finally defeated. And in the 30 years that I have been in the South, I have watched a lot of old Southern sympathies just slowly drip away. So we're doing better. We were doing just fine before the push for DEI. What it takes, in the same reason that it took good parents raising good kids to come up and take their jobs from them later on, or get successes for themselves, like in Hollywood or in the NBA or in sports in general. It's because you had virtuous parents. The same kind of virtue that says, I am going to reject the more racist ideologies that are holding back the United States space program. That virtue of leadership, that vision and drive to have everyone on the same page, that's a kind of unity that DEI has nothing to do with. DEI, the whole idea behind it, is an attempt to bring people who might not have the resources, might not have the experience into higher positions. And Thomas Sowell actually made a very good point about this, and it's a sad point, and it's one that not a lot of people fully understand. But when they noticed that they started bringing in more black students to higher education that weren't HBCUs, those students weren't performing as well. They had great high school grades. That's why they were able to get in, but they weren't performing as well as their other students, and thus they lost a lot of scholarship money. This even happened in Georgia under the Hope Scholarship, where a lot of people were able to have just good enough grades in high school to get the scholarship or the Zell Miller, and then they get into college and realize, oh, I am woefully unprepared for this. That is a problem that needs to be fixed at the local level. If you want to put your money where your mouth is, why don't you take a page out of LeBron's playbook, just don't follow it to its endpoint? He created his own school for students in Cleveland. Well, it turns out that school isn't doing too well. You really don't want to look into how bad it's doing. But at least it's an attempt, and you can build something off of that. So if the people who want DEI are looking for God too high up and too far away, meanwhile, in the legal sphere, you can make the case that it quite literally goes against the civil rights legislation, because if you're hiring based on race, well, you might be breaking the law as passed back at, in the 1960s. That is not a fair system. Now, granted, I'm kind of the mindset that you should be able to hire whoever you want. It's a free country. That's just not good for the idea of unity, which again isn't a part of DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Okay? Unity is not exactly a part of that. As a matter of fact, diversity and unity are polar opposites. So when you are building something here in the United States of America, you need to ask yourself what your vision is. You need to ask yourself, am I going to promote the right people into the right positions? And you need to ask yourself, am I having the virtues necessary to keep moving forward? And am I instilling that into my employees and my kids? That whole idea of virtue is the point here. And diversity, equity, inclusion takes that virtue and throws it away. That's the sad truth of the matter. What should happen is the people who want the ideals embedded in DEI, they're looking in the wrong place and need to start building infrastructure elsewhere so they can actually help people from other communities reach the echelons that they think they deserve. That's how America should be moving forward. 501c3 organizations, charities, people with their own visions and their own ideals. That's what makes America great, not DEI. Folks, my name is Brian. Hope you enjoyed that segment here on Politibrawl. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Catch you on the next one. And until then, y'all have a good one.